The divide between the rich and poor has always been predominant in society. Many people dream of living a lifestyle of luxury and work hard to get to a point in their life where they can live comfortably. The media makes it seem that hard work will always end in this outcome. However, this is not always true.
Prior to the 1910s, it was a time of imperialism in the United States and all around the world. Within the country, the economy was evolving, causing a societal difference between the classes. The large monopolistic companies were only getting richer. For example, Rockefeller with a modern-day network of 21 billion and Carnegie with 3.5 billion. The top 1% lived fancy lives, throwing lavish parties and elaborate dinners. The housewives relied on house servants and personal maids while their husbands were out at work. The gap between the rich and poor was significant, as the poor from the cities were living in horrible, unsanitary conditions like tenement housing. Poor families also relied on child labor during this time, which was not yet illegal.
The modernism era was a time characterized by flappers, parties, money, and gangsters. One of the richest men of the 1920s was mobster Al Capone. It is said that his income was $60 million from selling illegal alcohol, $25 million from gambling establishments, and $20 million from other illegal violent activities. This was a time where people would flaunt their worth and celebrate life. Parties for the elite, like the first ever Oscars, was filled with the most wealthy and famous.
That you've produced a real, epic, and fine achievement.
Meanwhile, those who were in the lower class were struggling to cope financially after World War I. Hard labor jobs in the textile, ship constructing, and coal mining industry declined. Farmers also took a hit, with their income dropping from $22 billion to $13 billion.
Heading into the 1930s, the Great Depression swept the country, and it was a time of struggle and poverty. Upper-class workers like lawyers and doctors saw a 40% drop in their incomes, and some of the new wealthy quickly became poor. The higher elites that weren't as affected partied through the times. The Great Depression was one of the hardest times for the lower class in every aspect. Unemployment rates skyrocketed, and many had to take tough public service jobs to get food on the table. Child labor occurred as well, and many of their part-time jobs took priority over schooling. For those desperately in need, there were food handouts. The social division widened here, since the upper class was opposed to all public handouts, for example, all the New Deal policies by the government.
By the 1940s and 50s, the upper class was paying 45% of their income. The wealthiest at the time were mainly those working in the entertainment industry. For example, Roger Blow was the chairman of the board and chief executive of the world's largest steel corporation and made around $300,000 a year. However, Frank Sinatra was selling over 150 million copies of his record, leading him to be worth over $100 million by the time of his death. According to an article from the New York Times, Sinatra gave away $50,000 worth of gold cigarette lighters before he was 30. With the fame and fortune of celebrities during this time period, it was hard for the government to focus on the problems of the poor.
More coffee, Ricky, darling. Sugar, dear.
25% of the U.S. population was living in poverty, where the annual income was around $3,000. Providing for a new family was more difficult at this time since prices for baby products increased due to the baby boom.
The 60s were a time of hippies and civil rights, and this culture flooded into the 1970s as well. While these new changes came, the division between the social classes persisted. The lower class was homeless and unemployed, and they would often move from city to city in search of work. In the early 60s, the husband worked during the day while the wife stayed in the home, but in the late 60s and early 70s, women entered the workforce outside the home. The upper class consisted of the top 1 to 6%, and most of them were CEOs and executives.
When thinking of the 80s, celebrities like Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston come to mind. The king of pop was earning around $1 billion a year, and the queen of the 80s was making around $100 million annually and $30 million during her tours. The founder of Jazzercise, Judy Shepard-Missette, was extremely popular for the creation of at-home workouts. Her profits carry on today, making $96 million on the workout videos. Looking onto the lives of the lower class, the introduction of crack impacted their lives severely. Crack was a cheap drug that many people in poverty were able to obtain. This led to the war on drugs, where many new health programs were taught in school, like DARE, Drug Abuse Resistance Education, and PDFA, Partnership for a Drug-Free America.
Going into the 1990s, many components were enriching the economy like the fast evolvement of technology. The rich were only getting richer with an income of over $170,000, which is 13.6 times the average income of the poorer class. The houses and cars were only getting more elaborate. In the consumer world, there were two main crazes, them being both coffee and cigarettes. Coffee bars and coffee houses appeared everywhere, while cigarette sales tripled from 1993 to 1998. A jump in productivity in 1995 helped the incomes of the lower class, but they never got close to those of the upper class.
Open your boxes. 1, 2, 3. Happiest moment ever!
In the early 2000s, the media was constantly flaunting the rich lifestyle. Shows like MTV Cribs and My Super Sweet 16 were extremely popular due to how they portrayed those living in luxury.
I'm Dallas Austin.
I'm Kim Kardashian.
It's Floyd Mayweather.
Yo, what's up? Yo, this is 50 Cent.
MTV Cribs. Let's go.
Millions of people watched these shows and saw a fictionalized lifestyle. Many of the celebrities on MTV Cribs have confessed to renting the things that were seen on the show because they were unable to actually afford them. Later on in the 2000s, the U.S. economy was struck with the stock market crashing, leading to the recession of 2008. Over 8 million jobs were lost and over 60,000 businesses filed for bankruptcy. It wasn't until programs like TARP, Trouble Assist Relief Program, by President Bush, and the stimulus package signed by President Obama that helped America out of the recession.
Even though the unemployment rate decreased from the 2000s, the poverty rate increased 15.1%. This is the highest rate since 1993. Recovering from the recession was very hard for many Americans. Hispanics and African Americans made up the majority of the working class from a poverty level. However, for the working class, easier access to education made a high-paying job more attainable. The minimum wage also increased during this time, therefore increasing the median household income to $59,000. Middle-class workers were mostly in areas of the Midwest or Northeast, since these areas relied heavily on manufacturing compared to the rest of the United States.
Even though the statistics about the lower class are shocking, what appears on media platforms mainly discusses the lives of those in the upper class. In the past years, the lives of the wealthy and famous have been portrayed as extremely glamorous and easily obtainable. So many chase after Instagram followers or YouTube subscribers. One example of the social media influencers would be the Kardashians. In 2015, Kylie Jenner released her own cosmetic company, which is estimated to be worth over $800 million, enough to be included in Forbes magazine. Researchers have discovered that her company is made with the same products from a company named ColourPop. They sell their glosses at half the price as Kylie, but without her name attached to the brand, they make less of a profit than her.
Why does this matter? Well, the divide between the social classes has led to many public disputes and scandals. Recently, the college scandal arose and many people found out that the people of the upper class were bribing college admission officers to get their children into the universities. This brought up the question of how far people with money will go to get ahead, even if it's illegal. This also left many people wondering how long this has been going on and how else they are getting an unfair advantage.
In April of 2019, a fire broke out in the Notre Dame. In just 3 days, people from the elite class raised over $1 billion. This was a shock to many since foundations and charities have never experienced gaining as large of a surplus of money as this in such little time. The money used to restore the Notre Dame could have been enough to rescue many cities in France from poverty, and been extremely useful for foundations like those decreasing Earth's carbon footprint. Either way, this event has shown how powerful the elite class is, and in more recent years, it has shown how much power it can have over politics.
The division in social classes continues to create a split in public opinion on all issues, big or small. The power of money has an astounding impact on how decisions are made and what legislation passes. The influence and power of the wealthy leaves us all wondering if our opinion is taken equally to theirs.